As we have seen in earlier modules, rules and regulations are required to protect people who are in a weak position. For instance, they could be small farmers in the clutch of unscrupulous moneylenders or workers in the unorganized sector. Rules and regulations are required even to protect the environment. Consumers also need to be protected through legislation and action that ensure them their rights. Individual consumers are often scattered and not united. This makes them easy targets for unscrupulous elements to exploit. Sellers usually refuse to take any liability for goods once they are sold and are out of their hands. They claim that the customer is accountable for the condition of the sold goods. Consumers also get cheated when shopkeepers use incorrect weights and measures, put extra charges in the bill, adulterate the foodstuff that they intend to sell, sell defective goods, or sell goods whose expiry dates have passed. While traders and shopkeepers exploit consumers in a small fashion, big producers like MNCs can dominate sections of the market. From their powerful position, big companies can manipulate consumers who are individual, scattered, and make small purchases. For instance, such companies have huge advertisement budgets that they can use to give out misleading information about their products. All these malpractices and many more made a strong case for a consumer protection movement to rise and represent the rights of consumers. Thus, the consumer movement was born out of consumer dissatisfaction due to the restrictive and unfair trade practices being indulged in by producers or sellers. Initially, there were no rules and regulations against the malpractices of manufacturers and sellers. If customers were not pleased with a product, often all they could do was to boycott that brand or shop and buy another one, or shop elsewhere, or do both. All the exploitation at the hands of the sellers and the big producers made a strong case for the consumers to unite and protect their rights. Specifically, in the post-independence period in India, there were artificial food shortages. Shopkeepers hoarded and then sold the same goods for very high prices in the black market. They also adulterated edible oil and food items to earn huge profits. To counter such blatant misuse, some consumers took the first steps towards forming a consumers' forum in the 1960s. Until the 1970s, the role of the consumer movement was limited to exhibiting how consumers could be duped and writing in magazines and papers about consumers' rights. Slowly, consumer groups were formed which delved into the mismanagement of funds and appropriation of products that were meant for ration shops. They also demonstrated against the terrible overcrowding in public buses, and so on. In this manner, the consumer movement slowly grew to become a powerful one, able to put pressure on big producers and companies. Internationally, the movement got a boost from the UN guidelines for consumer protection, which were formulated in 1985. Today, it has about 240 organizations under it and covers 100 countries. In India, the enactment of the Consumer Protection Act of 1986 boosted the movement. This act is more commonly known as COPRA. However, by itself, Government legislation is not enough to uphold the position of consumers. Consumers themselves have to come forward and fight for their rights in consumer forums and courts. We will learn about this in the subsequent modules. Largely due to the efforts of the consumer movement and government legislation, consumers have certain rights that they can exercise. Consumer rights include the right to safety, the right to be informed, the right to choose, the right to seek redress, and the right to represent in consumer courts. When producers sell any goods or services, it is their responsibility to ensure their safety for the consumer. It is the right of the consumer to be offered only products that are safe. In case of any damage, the producer should compensate the consumer. Public and/or government intervention may also be required to ensure that producers maintain the required quality and adhere to safety regulations. Another right is the right of consumers to be informed about the goods and services that they buy. Producers must always provide, and the consumers should always look for details on packed commodities, which include price, ingredients, batch number, expiry dates, and manufacturer's address. Certain medicinal drugs need to be handled with care. Their packing must have directions about usage printed on them. Any side effects or risk to potential users must also be mentioned. Hence, consumers have the right to be informed about the goods and services that they purchase. In case of any misleading information, they can initiate action against shopkeepers who sell expired foodstuff or medicines, demand that goods be sold within the maximum retail price or MRP mentioned on the label, and so on. The right to be informed got a boost from the Right to Information Act, or RTI, which was passed by the Parliament in 2005. It gives citizens the right to know about the functioning of any government department. All consumers also possess the right to select or choose any product that they wish to buy. They have the right to continue and terminate any service. In case of a midterm termination, they have the right to be refunded the remaining amount of charges. Similarly, sellers cannot force consumers to buy any product that they do not wish to purchase. The next right concerns customers' right to redress or remedy any grievances against unfair trade practices and exploitation. In case the sellers of services or products dupe the customers have the right to seek redress and demand compensation for the wrong done to them. While seeking any redress, the consumers have the right to represent in consumer courts. In case they require any help, there are numerous consumer forums and councils. These voluntary bodies can either help consumers to file the case or to fight the case for them in consumer courts. The government provides financial support to the forums and consumer protection councils as they help to create and spread awareness among consumers. Resident welfare associations also guide their members about how to file cases in consumer courts. In 1986, the government passed the Consumer Protection Act, or COPRA, which ensures that consumers have the right to represent in consumer courts. COPRA establishes a three-tier quasi-judicial consumer court structure as shown. Consumers can progress from the district level to the state and then the national court in case they are not satisfied with the verdict of the lower court. In this manner, consumers can avail themselves of a number of rights to protect their interests. However, they need to be aware of these rights and be well informed. As consumers, we need to be aware of what choices are available to us. We should make informed choices about the products and services that we avail of. This awareness should include our rights as consumers, as well as the actions that we can take and the choices that we can make. In other words, we need to become well-informed consumers. After the Consumer Protection Act was enacted in 1986, independent departments of consumer affairs were formed in the central and state governments. The departments regularly put out advertisements in newspapers and magazines and on television to make consumers conscious of their rights. There are also several agencies like BIS, Hallmark, and Agmark to test the quality of various products sold in the market. Only products that pass the test of quality are certified. Consumers should only buy certified products. As consumers, we should also be aware that for products that are crucial from a health or safety angle, certification is mandatory or compulsory. Since the 24th of December 1986, when the COPRA was legislated, the consumer movement has made many strides. To mark this event, we celebrate the 24th of December as National Consumer Day. India has a system where consumers can get representation in consumer courts. There are over 700 consumer groups in the country to represent the views of customers. However, are we consumers as aware of our rights as we ought to be? Is the consumer movement as strong as it can be? Unfortunately, only about 30-odd consumer groups out of the 700 work efficiently. The process of redress might also be difficult as consumers do not often take cash memos, and hence it is very difficult to prove anything conclusively against the wrongdoings of shopkeepers. The laws relating to compensation are often vague and their enforcement is weak. Shopkeepers often ignore the rules that regulate the markets. It is almost 23 years since the COPRA was passed, but the results regarding consumer awareness are mixed and progress is slow. Still, there is some progress as more and more consumers become aware of their rights. It is this consumer awareness that will take the consumer movement forward.